process. Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Warner from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Grunberg, I'm not going to echo what all my colleagues have said. Behavior's got to change. It needs to be a meaningful plan. I think some of us have withheld full comments or full calls the way some of my colleagues have. But the plan has to be real and credible. So far, we've not seen that. I also want to build Mr. Barr on the somewhat where Senator Rounds is going. You know, I've written you separately on the Basel III Accord. I think the reason why there's been such pushback is that, at least early on, there was not kind of the evidence-based documentation of what would be the cumulative effect of these rules, these rule changes, particularly in terms of credit availability. So I hope before the final rules are come out, you would make those estimates public. I mean, I think, again, echoing what Senator Rounds says, we need that from an oversight standpoint. And I do hope, again, that there will be an evidence-based indication of the risks and benefits of these proposed rules. I know you're going through a reworking process. I know it's probably caused lots of consternation. I've talked to you and Marty and others about this. But we need, wherever you come down, we're going to need that evidence-based approach. And I don't think in the initial rule proposal it was there. I want to actually, this is going to be mostly directed at Mr. Hsu, since I had from Mr. Barr and Mr. Grunberg. I asked this the last time. I think one of the things as we deal with thinking about a rule structure for our banks, particularly around liquidity problems, the way we saw with SVB, really taught us that the whole notion of stability deposits and the notion of internet-based runs, that we're way behind where technology has taken us. Obviously, we need to make sure that we have ability to prevent temporary liquidity issues from turning into solvency crises. And one of the things that has bothered me, and I've shared this with all of you, I've shared with my colleagues on the committee, is the whole beginning of the Fed, the discount window was set up exactly for this circumstance. But what we've seen is, at least recently, is very rarely played that role. So, and I say this to my colleagues on both sides now, I'm going to be soon introducing a bill, and I've been talking to some of my Republican colleagues, and welcome my Democratic colleagues as well, to reform the discount window, to fight the so-called stigma that goes about utilization if you use it. I think this really ought to be, back to the beginnings of the Fed, a more often used tool. Now, the bill will implement a mandatory discount window test borrowing with different tiers and an exemption for those institutions under $1 billion in assets, and again, other safeguards to make sure we don't put too much undue burdens on small depositories. But it would also require that institutions demonstrate that they can use the window. The SVB didn't even have procedures set up. And then give regulators, allow them to give proper credit in liquidity evaluations for institutions that do that. I think we need to look at how we keep the liquidity window open at a longer basis. And I'm wide open on how we can do other things to try to remove the stigma issue. And what the legislation also tried to do, promote a more harmonized process across the Federal Reserve banks and better coordination between the Fed and the home loan bank boards, again, to make sure that we can get this right. I got your colleagues' comments on this. We've had a private conversation on this, but I would like you to share whether you think this kind of approach in terms of making the liquidity window, destigmatizing it, making sure institutions know how to use it, and modernizing it would be a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. I think it helps to step back and remember what the problem we're trying to solve is, which is that bank runs are faster. And because bank runs are faster, that ability to be able to use the discount window when a bank has appropriate amounts of collateral to be able to do so in a safe and sound manner is critical. So all the steps you laid out, we are happy to continue engaging with you as to how to frame that so it's effective it is tricky. It's a tricky problem to solve, but we're committed to working with you to solve this problem because we do need to solve this if we're going to address the speed of bank runs.
Well, I know my time's expired, but I've invited any of my colleagues to join me on this. I think before we start adding new regs and rules, we ought to make sure some of the tools that were set up in the first place are more fully used. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kennedy of Louisiana is recognized.
I hope Senator Al Franken is watching today.